G'day guys, you're all on Ben's World. That's the website's Ben's World Postman Productions. So just Google those two things together, Ben's World Postman Productions. You'll find me easy enough. We're going to be talking about the smell down in Clutha and Mataura, and we'll use together the two words which I can never pronounce, pronunciation, Mataura or Mataura, and ouvea, which is the premix stuff. So when I refer to that place in Clutha and I refer to premix, you'll know what I'm talking about. I just kind of rushing this through a wee bit, so I'm sorry there's a few preparations I haven't got, but let's get straight into it. The reason why I'm making this post today is, to me, I can see something really glaringly wrong is happening here with this dross spill that's happening in Southland, and there's a few points which are very simple, so we'll just head into those straight away and then we'll kind of give backdrop to them. The first thing is this notion that this dross is basically, the issue is just the dross with the ouvea or the premix, and that it releases ammonia. That's the very first issue, because when you actually look at what dross does, and I'm going to get into doing posting that later in the weekend, but I just want to get this point out because I really ran these points home, is it's not just ouvea. There's all sorts of yummy good stuff in there. There's arsenic, there's cyanide, there's fluoride. At the bottom, I'll put a little post in this one. I'll just try and make it really visual because I'm going to try and speed through this very, very quickly. But you'll turn around and see from when they dealt with Mataura International, Mataura Asia Pacific, in 2015, when they turned around and discovered that they were actually putting stuff in this gravel pit, that we discover this issue of the fact of when they did their testing, they found all these different chemicals within that dross. So the first thing that's really bugging the shit out of me about the way that the story has been run and the way that it's been controlled in the Southland Times and the press is that, yes, they're talking about the people about being concerned, but they're narrowing the focus of what actually is the issue to what is again described in the Environmental South report as the lesser of evils. So there's lots more toxins in that stuff. The second aspect of it, of course, is that you might say, oh, you know, it releases, it may cause ammonia. Whoop-de-fucking do. You'll get sore eyes. If you go and actually start reading about what happens when ammonia gets into the waterways, especially when you've got lots of nitrates out there, which is what you have in Southland, again, you start to see what it's actually doing is it's basically taking out bacteria from that area and effectively creating something which is way worse. The ammonia it takes a lot more longer time to get out of the water. The leaching effect is a lot deeper. So that's the second thing. They're not actually telling you why this is a big deal. Okay, now this all ties in a very, very, very important thing, is because there's a thing out there called the Danes report, and what it's basically made people realise is that the levels, there's a direct correlation between the nitrates and the nitrates ammonians in the soil and the correlations that exist with bowel cancer and some basically stomach cancer in that area down there. Southland actually has one of the highest ratios of cancer for this type of cancer in the country. So there's a red flag for you right there. Okay, so that's the real point about why this is a big deal, having these drosses there, what it actually does. The third point, which is in some ways the biggest point, it's the elephant in the room. It's the thing which is mentioned, but no one's really kind of drawing attention to it or focusing on it, keeping all on Mataura. It's all about here. This is the problem. It's only in this town. There's no other problems anywhere else. Bullshit. Okay? If you turn around and you go and look at AB, a company called AB, it's a fertilising company in Winton. That's where the dross was taken when they first discovered that there was some stuff happening in Edendale, which is the second place, of course. It was taken to AB, which is in Winton. At that particular dump, you have toxic waste from Timaru being brought there. You have toxic waste from Christchurch being brought there. You have got the dross that's been brought there. There was 1080 being brought there. That's a lot of stuff happening in one place, and that's just, you know, what we found in a very, very, very short time. And I said we also have storage facilities in Arrow Flats, which again, the resource consent somehow managed to get put through. Even though nobody wanted it there, even though it, like Winton and like the Mataura, are in low flood zone areas. So again, the report's only talking on here, but saying, well, wait a minute, how do these places get to be here? Especially when, you know, they had the submission hearings, which these days is basically about your neighbours surrounding you and people that are directly involved in the industry. Like, the public no longer gets to have a say in this resource management process. The people who were neighbours that did have an interest in this were saying, no, we really don't want them here. And yet it managed to get taken place and get taken through. So that's another issue, you know. And the whole thing is, when we turn around, we start to look at this sort of the nature of these companies. It's like this company gets set up, it turns around, and it's set up independently from the main company, so there's no culpability or fallover that occurs. It ends up buying another company which is fallover, which the ownership is quite sketchy in ownership. It buys them, sets them up as an independent company, so when they fall over, they still got that situation. Meanwhile, they're getting massive amounts of money, you know, for doing what they're doing. The next issue we've got to turn around is this figure that keeps on getting battered around by all the mainstream papers, is of its 22,000 tonnes. Well, we know that there's a figure, again, of 10,000 tonnes stored at Mataura, but that actually means that there's 10,000 tonnes stored somewhere else. Well, if you're actually going to go back to that 2015 situation where they got taken to court, it wasn't 22,000, it was 32,000 just in that case alone. So, you know, you start to work out the math and you start to go, this something doesn't actually add up here. And, you know, we've been looking at this situation as far as I understand, and we're going to be looking a bit deeper and so on. But you have, since 2012, they stopped exporting it out of the country. And around 2013, 14, they basically turned around and said, yes, we're going to turn around and make this stuff, and it's going to cater by a product called dross. And that dross, again, as you said, you look into it, it's got all sorts of other yummy goodies. It's not just ouvea. That's what they said, the lesser of evils. And that dross is at 0.4% kg per tonnage. I did the math beforehand. But when you work it actually out, over that same period, you're actually looking at, and I'm working on a conservative figure of basically that the TY point is a well, what it says is the modern smelters make burnout at 0.0405%, and the higher ones can actually go up as far as 4 kg. Well, the TOY smelter was actually built in 1965. It has been modernised from that particular process, but it has also been used for the highest form of aluminium you can, stuff that's used in high-tech technologies, military aircraft. You know, so this stuff actually has a higher pure rate of dross left over because it's basically a concentrated form. End result is I've given a very conservative figure, but my conservative figure basically is you're looking at a figure of 120,000 tonnes stored at multiple sites, which by the looks of it are being used to store other stuff as well. All of this stuff is leaching into the soil. This brings me to the kind of the final point, which is that, you know, very interesting to see how the story is actually being, you know, managed and controlled. Is that if you look at what's happening in Christchurch or the Canterbury Plains, is that dairy farmers for years were told, don't put nitrates in soil. Dairy farming is bad. It's going to basically destroy the local water levels. Blah 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 blah. Ignore conspiracy theory. Well, now they're getting to the point where they're really, because of this report, the Dane report, very well documented report, exceptionally out there, really having a huge impact. And what that basically means is that if you're using water off the main infrastructure, you get, like the public, you have a basic water rate, but it's ultimately, I wouldn't say free, because there is no such thing as free lunch, but you're not paying commercial rates. On the other hand, if you are turning around and you're using this farm because you're, you know, a dairy farm or a big food corporation or whatever, you're using this for a commercial purpose, so you're using the land to make money from selling a product, and you get charged a commercial rate, and you're expected to basically take care of your own bores and your own infrastructure for that. Now, what's happening is that dairy industry and forestry, which again has got the whole issue of free carbon credits, and you get into the large EV corporations and the large corporations, are saying, no, we don't think it's fair. We don't think it's fair that we have been poisoning and toxifying this environment for over 2 to 3 decades, and now we think that no, because that means that we're going to have to spend money to actually put in the filters, or we're not going to be able to use it because it doesn't pass the quality, the water doesn't pass the grade quality required because of the long-term toxification. No, we think everybody should actually be paying for this water across the board. But of course, what we'll do is we'll manage that water for you. Now, that's really kind of a big thing about what's going on in the background, whether it's, you know, whether it's being planned or it's in a situation of what they call in politics making an opportunity out of crisis is irrelevant. That's what's actually going on. Now, these have huge consequences because, of course, you know, what you're basically saying is that we will then turn around and actually have to pay for the continual poisoning of the water, and at the same time, they get a free ride having actually created this mess in the first place. And it's all done this back-scratching way, and it's where you turn around and look at the whole TAR Pacific International, where companies get set up, but they're set up in such a way that if it goes wrong, they don't have to pay for it, and then they do deals with the local council, and the council agrees to turn around and actually pay a percentage amount of the money, even though it's not their problem, when the original people who actually did it get off scot-free. It's the same situation with TY. You know, what we're seeing is, what's disturbing from TY is that you're making these byproducts, which is, you know, highly, you know, I mean, there's 75% aluminum content within this byproduct, which you know, we're calling the Premax. That product, you know, aside from actually being an antidotally associated with neurological diseases, Alzheimer's, dementia-based products, again, cancer-based problems, is at the end of the day something that was meant to have been paid for by TY Point, but they have gotten away by doing it, because each time they turn around and get some election time, they say to the government, oh, if you don't do what we're going to do, we're going to shut our doors, and oh, you need us because we're providing so much money for your workforce. In the meantime, they've had this decades of period of basically been able to actually poison the basic ground which you get your food and your water from, which you're now going to pay and your children are going to actually have to pay for, which is actually a good thing for these guys, because the scale of them in which the economic model is now working goes, the more that we can make water a scarce product, the higher the return we can. So they're actually quite glad for what's going on, and the central government's going, well, obviously local government can't be trusted to look after their own water, so we'll have to come along and we're going to have to look after that water for them, but we're going to get our mates, the ones that actually poisoned in the first place, we're going to put them in on the management team, because what could possibly go wrong? So, recap. My problem with this story at the day about the toxic concerns, and there's a couple of little things in there, but the main ones they're saying again is that it's not just happening in one location in Southland. There are multiple locations where you find this toxic material has been dumped. Also, when you turn around and you look at how it's been done often in a subverted way. When you turn around again, you look at what happened in Edendale, when they discovered that the substance was here, because one of the people actually got sick again. So, you know, when the civil defence says, oh, I don't really think this is much of a problem, fact of the matter is we're getting people that are getting sick. So them saying what they think is kind of irrelevant versus the action of what's actually happening. But Environmental South's case, they went in there. They put up again. I put this little slip on it because it's the best thing I've seen to date on basically how these guys actually roll. Good on you too, the person who made that particular report. But when they would turn around and actually turn around and created the situation, you had the situation where they found out what was going on in Edendale, and they went in to do the investigation, and in the meantime, that pilings had shifted. They had fiddled around, and all the way through, as you're looking for the whole process, this has been the entire process. They have acted with complete lack of faith. Now, the mainstream media, I turned around and put up this post today about on New Zealand Journalists Association, and it was quite funny because a lot of people turn around and do the usual thing, oh, you can't put a spelling in the wrong place, oh, that's not appropriate, blah, blah, blah. And then I turned around and, you know, gave shit as much as I gave back, and said, oh, it's not appropriate for you to take other people's work. Oh, funny, it's one rule for the other, and I basically got taken off and I'm not allowed to report on that site for a particular moment. But the point was, they are really downplaying this because these papers make a lot of money through their marketing and their advertising of companies like Ravensdale Fertiliser, Fonterra Milk Company. So they don't want to rock the boat. So they are actually down-tuning it and they're going, oh, don't get emotional. Well, yes, I am getting emotional because we're getting poisoned because of your fucking greed. You know, that's what's happening. You are actually murdering people. The cancer rates in New Zealand currently are 1 in 2 people. Okay? Bowel cancer, of which this has been directly, the Danes has been directly connected to, is the third highest cancer rate. And cancer rates, including the bowel cancer, will in the next 50 years, according to our health system, they will double. Now, it isn't going to be Fonterra, it isn't going to be TY Point, it isn't going to be Ravensdale that actually pays for this. It's going to be you, I, and your children. And it'll either be paid because you increase medical costs, and we've all turned around seeing how much the the Southland Health Board is struggling. You know, they've got this worst case of bowel cancer in the country, and yet they have one of the considered to have the least their standard of care is low for this particular condition, which they know that they're going to have to dealing with. I mean, why? Because there's no money there. There's plenty of money for business, plenty of money to borrow $12 million for infrastructure for the trunking companies, which are all behind this. But when it actually comes to money to put into things like education, you know, an independent media, healthcare, no, I'm sorry, we don't have that money, you know, unless we privatise it. Okay, in which case, what we're basically making in New Zealand is a country of two countries where you either have the money and you're part of this little corporate little elite, or you're the wider group of people and you may as well basically be peasants. And that's what they're basically doing. This whole global financial neoliberal system, it's sucking us in. One last comment I'll also make today is that, again, I find it very interesting that during the situation, the civil defence people have come in, and again, they've said remarks which are not matching up with what the locals in that area, the eyewitnesses, the volunteers who've, you know, out of their own time gone in there, not been given any hazardous material, even though when you read the literature it says must handle with hazardous material. No, they don't get it. You know, again, where's the media reporting out that when they actually move the stuff, they put it on big wheel sacks and then put it on trucks, which didn't have any hazardous material on it, and it wasn't stored properly. Just like the asbestos that was brought down from Christchurch and put into Winton. Suddenly, due process goes out the window for these guys. They don't have to follow the law. Right? Now, Jacinda Ardern, the Civil Defence, were making this particular statement and pretty much were saying things which the experts from Canterbury University and from all the literature available about this material was contradictory, as they were downscaling for them. The point that I actually really noticed about this was that the gentleman was wearing the uniform and presenting himself as an officer of New Zealand Civil Defence. Well, this is really interesting because New Zealand Civil Defence officially came to an end at the end of last year, where it was replaced with a new organisation called the National Emergency Management Act. This is also a big point, so we'll do one last recap at the end, but this is point number 5 of those other 4 points I mentioned. They were the National Emergency Management Act, came into being in December of last year. They report directly to the Prime Minister's office, but by having this person speak in the capacity of a civil defence, he was doing it in such a way in which that meant that the Prime Minister, the head of state, didn't have to get involved, and the central government didn't have to get involved. They could turn around and look the other way. And at the same time, he's speaking on behalf of an agency which no longer exists. So basically, they can't be held accountable for anything. So he shouldn't, basically, he was speaking in a position which he had no jurisdiction to be there. If he was going to be in there speaking in an official capacity, the jacket that he should have been wearing was the National Emergency Management Agency. But to avoid that responsibility, which seems to be the story of the day, no, he put on the jacket that doesn't actually have any power behind that badge. And I bet you a lot of you guys did not know that. This has been Vincent from Ben's Hall reporting to you. We'll be looking into this a lot deeper down the road, mostly because over the next week or so, I'm on the road travelling. It's going to be a lot more hard for me to do regular posts, and it's going to take me a lot more time. Also, I think probably what's going to happen is that as the mainstream media turn around to start creating shape and formatting the narrative story, this becomes the story. It's going to be harder and harder to get over this drama. In the first stage, you get a chance to actually, get to people before those guys even figured out what's going on, so you get to you get to shape the story. So I'm that's why I'm speaking tonight from that point there. Later on we'll be giving you more stuff in depth to come back to that. I do hope to be on a couple of radio shows about this over the next couple of a week or so, knock on wood. But in this main time, when you're turning around, you're talking amongst yourself, and when you turn around, you're talking to your local council people, your local borough people, you're going to public meetings. The 5 points I want you to take away tonight is that, number 1, it's not just about the premix in Mataura, M-A-T-A-R-U-A. It's actually about all of the toxins that actually come with that particular dross. all the dross at number 2 in all the towns, not just Mataura, but all these towns actually throughout Southland that are actually having this stuff being done in ways where it's always done quite underhanded. They basically get big ticks when they shouldn't be getting big ticks. There aren't inspections when they shouldn't be getting big inspections. Number 3 is the fact that, it's not just good enough to say, oh my God, this might create ammonia. Let's explain to people what ammonia does, why having it in your food chain and your ecology is not a good thing. What will it do? It will actually slow down, it'll spog up the system. It will actually enhance the impact of what nitrate has occurring, which according to the Danes, the situation is basically increasing the chances that people actually have of getting bowel cancer. So that's the 3rd point. The 4th point that we turn around saying is that the figure that they're trying to say to you all the time, 22,000 tonnes, 22,000 tonnes, 22,000 tonnes. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. It's much higher than that. Have a big discussion. Go and look at the math. Bang. Number 5 point is the fact that our Prime Minister is turning around and trying to avoid the situation because she's having official spokesmen, people get up and speak in jackets which actually have no authority. Civil Defence as an agency no longer exists. The only agency within the authority under the legislation is the National Emergency Management Agency, which reports directly to the Prime Ministers. This is another example of basically dodging their responsibility and not having accountability in the government. Topping on top of that, number six, which will just ram that particular point home, is look who is not commenting on the story. TY Point is saying nothing. They're going zip. They're just keeping their mouths real quiet. No one's challenging them. No one's getting statements actually out of them. Environmental South is the other person at the moment, which, by the way, the guys on the ground, good on you, but your bureaucrat administrators suck. They are saying nothing. Nobody's asking them questions of that. Number six, that point is the way that the newspapers are actually reporting this. The journalists themselves on the ground are doing a good job. They are reporting the story. They are going to people. They're getting he says, she says statements, but they're not investigating it. And the editors are not actually allowing them to go beyond what that person says or what that person says. They're not allowed. You're not seeing official information acts. You're not seeing original primary documentations. It's all done in a way where it's basically fundamentally hearsay. And if you look at the story that Rebecca Kelly, I think, did in the Southland Times today, when you look at the actual web link that she turned around and says, locals concerned about toxic waste I'm paraphrasing it, but that was the issue, that the locals were concerned about this. The story became District Gore Mayor says not an issue. Okay, now that title does not reflect what that was in that story, and that's the editor being a little bit of self-censorship there because he doesn't want to upset all those advertising dollars from Ravensdale and Fonterra. You guys have got to get on to actually understanding how the media actually works. You've got to turn around and you actually got to hold these papers accountable. You've got to hold your local politicians accountable. If you're local hapu in the area, you need to call your iwi into account as well. I never have any particular problem with the hapu. I always think the power starts at the hapu level. We all know that the iwi corporate is basically controlled by a lot of guys in old school ties, and half of them actually have those old Pākehā, old colonial names. So, at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of respect for the iwi corporation. There's not a lot that a white honky like me can do about it. The only people that actually can do that is the hapu on the ground. This is really, really important that you do, because it's not about you or the greater society. It's about your kids and what kind of quality of life they're going to have. Ben's TV.